Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And today we're going to talk about Spine 151, Traffic, directed by Steven Soderbergh, 2000. Now, I guess I should preface this, since I've been doing these for quite a while. I don't know how many episodes you've seen or what you've gone through, but I do want to say right off the bat that I don't like being. I don't think I've ever been accused of this, but so this is probably one of those preemptive self-defenses. But I don't think of myself as a film snob, someone who and it's very easy to possibly assume that because I'm reviewing these Criterion DVDs. For me, I consider myself more of a cinephile, and I really am interested in the possibilities of cinema. So I definitely am intrigued by something that seems really new, or at the very least is new to me, because there's a long history and there's so many other directors and other periods and other styles of films that I've barely scratched the surface and I haven't really gotten into. So for me, I'm more interested in exploring the possibilities, and then also, but at the same time, it doesn't get in the way. It shouldn't get in the way of films that just speak to me. Something about either the story or the characters or the style or the director or whatever aspect of the film I will like. So I don't. It's not that I can only like certain films or something. You know, I will like what I would like, and that's really, in the end, that's what should matter. Now, why do I preface this with this? Well, I guess it can be a film that could be looked at as like, oh, how dare you bring Steven Soderbergh into it? It's almost as if somehow Soderbergh is the equivalent of any other commercially well-known film director. You could accuse him of being like George Lucas or Steven Spielberg. I don't actually. I think that's probably a straw man argument. I don't think anybody has ever really compared him to that. Especially given that Soderbergh, in his career, has always been one to go back and forth. You know, he definitely does the Hollywood films to satisfy that market, and he does it really well. But he also likes to recharge himself and to go back to more experimental, more daring works, and you definitely have to respect him for that. To have that balance, and I think you do need to have that balance. You don't want to go too far into your own world so that you start alienating yourself, and likewise you don't want to be too much into the mainstream as to prevent yourself from doing something interesting. So that's why I find Steven Soderbergh very interesting as a director. I kind of think of him as a kind of auteur non auteur, because he's not doing it out of some personal expression. He's not approaching film in that way. He just wants to make a really good film that tells a story really well. So for him, it's very much about the individual parts adding up to form a cohesive whole, and it's that attention to detail that makes his films really interesting. Yes, there are other directors that probably do it better than he does, but he's definitely one of those directors that, for him, it's about the parts adding up to form a whole, and he does it, and he does many things really well. Yeah. Probably that prelude was just all pointless, but I felt like this was a good time to talk about just really what I try to see in films and what I tend to like about it. So, and also I would say that Traffic is one of the films that, I mean, there wasn't, in thinking back to what kind of films that I've explored, there really isn't. There's not so much one film, but there's a whole bunch of them. And as I'm going to go through, and some of them are included in the Criterion Collection, so I will go. So I will talk about them when they strike up. And Traffic, I think, is one of them. Very, very quickly, the history of my film viewing. I started off just like anybody else. You know, you watch movies as entertainment. So sometimes you would go to the theater if something is playing, and you go see that. And then with home video, and as soon as you get a VHS player, and in fact, actually, I think my dad once had a Beta machine. It was, but then eventually got sold off very early on. But I think for a while he did have a Beta player, but that was a very short-lived thing. But yeah, once we had but with a VHS player, you can then watch movies at home. Either buy a title, or very often we either if there was a movie playing on TV, we would record that, or sometimes and often we would rent videos, and some we would rent more than others. Probably the most frequent title that my brother and I insisted on watching a lot was The Princess Bride. There were a few others, but that one sticks up in my mind the most. So you start off there, and this was, of course, when we were kids, and I mean, you didn't go out of your way to see something like The Seventh Seal when you were very young, or The 400 Blows when you were very young. Although, I do remember my mother taking me to see Radio Days when it came out in the theater. And I have no idea to this day why I was dragged along. Probably because I could be well behaved. I wasn't one of those kids that screamed in the theater or something, or screamed to fit, which actually is kind of irritating. The few times that I've been in the theater nowadays, there have been a few cases where I've seen some parents bringing their 6-month-old kid or even year-old kid to see a film like I think I can't remember what I saw where I saw this happen. It might have been, oh, it was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It was the second time that I saw it. I saw bringing the kid. I'm thinking, why are you bringing a 6-month-old kid to go see The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo? That's just, it doesn't. And I've heard other stories from other people that this has happened. So, and actually when Radio Days came out, I think I was 3 or 4. So I think I had some sense of right and wrong, or in the makings. So I knew how to behave. So anyways, so there's that, and then when I was a teenager, obviously when you're a teenager, your viewing options expand a little bit more, and if you demonstrate yourself to be more mature, you then can handle more intense stuff, and so the palette gets a little bit wider. And around that time, my mother was really interested in films that came out in Sundance, and so that opened me up to a little bit more possibilities. That it wasn't just what you could see in the Cineplex or the Multiplex on any given year. There's more films, and then of course there's some back catalog. My dad is one to stick to his catalog. There are certain films that he likes, and he pretty much sticks to them. And so there was a combination of that where I got influenced by my mother a little bit, my mother's explorations, and my father's own history. And so, and then when I got to college, it expanded even more with taking a few film classes and then seeing a bigger library. And that's also when Netflix came in, and I was interested in the Criterion Collection. So I really wanted to go on my own and really try to get as much background and history as I can. And so the point of all of this is that Traffic came about at this time when I was starting to explore film, certainly through the Criterion Collection, and then just in general. So, but interestingly, I think probably the reason why I did the whole prelude thing in the beginning was Traffic is kind of sits in both sides. It it is a film that dared to do its own thing and wasn't afraid to do its own thing, but it also became this immensely popular film. It got 5 Academy Award nominations. I forget if it won. I forget which ones it won, or I think it was just all nominations. But and actually, that was a case where Aaron Brockovich came out the same year. So actually, it was so Steven Soderbergh. I believe Steven Soderbergh was nominated twice, once for Aaron Brockovich and the other for Traffic, and he won for Aaron Brockovich. I think he should have won more for Traffic than Aaron Brockovich personally, because Aaron Brockovich, which I have seen, and I'll get this right off. I'll get this very quickly out of the way. I do not like Julia Roberts. I just don't. So, considering that this is one of the films that centers on her, it's just gonna really rub me the wrong way. I really just don't like her at all. I haven't seen Pretty Woman, and I refuse to do so because of that reason. And I've suffered through My Best Friend's Wedding, and I've actually done a rant of it before, but I don't want to bother repeating it. So anyway, so that's why I really think he should have won the stuff more for Traffic, because Traffic was a lot more interesting. Which I'm finally gonna get into the film itself. Some things that in revisiting it, there's a few things that I notice. And by the way, as I'm doing more of these episodes, I may or may not actually revisit the films, because a lot of them I've seen enough times to know what they're about, and I know what I'm going to talk about once I get to the titles. I may rewatch them if it's been a while since I've seen them, or if I need to refresh my memory. But often I can probably just do it without revisiting the films. But for this case, I did revisit the film because I felt that it was needed to do so. Now I feel like I probably don't need to do that. But anyways, in rewatching it, there's a few things that I noticed that stuck out to me in this go around. One is that considering that 13 years have separated the film's initial release and now, it's still it's eerily relevant today. And I think, and it's also interesting to see where we've come in the 13 years in between Traffic and now. For starters, yes, I know what happened last year in Washington State and Colorado in regards to marijuana. And it's becoming ever more, the idea of legalization certainly of marijuana and of other drugs have been around for quite a while, but now it's getting even more popular and such. And there have been efforts in other states. In fact, I live in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts a couple years ago voted to lower the punishments for possession of marijuana, so that it's not as stringent. So, but there's still this prohibition, and personally, and I think Traffic had some influence in this, but I think there were some other things that happened as well. My position is, personally, I'm not interested in drugs. For starters, I'm already weird anyway, and I don't think I need to add anything else to make me either more weird or actually make me normal. Both outcomes, both possible, and they're very likely that it's going to be the outcomes. I'm either going to be more weird or I'm actually going to be normal. And either scenario scares me and probably would scare other people that know me. So why bother? So I'm personally not interested in it myself. I do think that there are. I mean, I understand when you introduce a chemical that can alter your thinking process or impair your thinking process, or the big thing is it diminishes your inhibitions. I don't think drugs necessarily change you. I think drugs they tend to more, and this also, I would also throw in alcohol in this too. it doesn't really, I don't think it really changes who you are. It's not like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing where it transforms you, but it diminishes your inhibitions, and then it lets, I think, what's inside you come out more. So you come out more uninhibited. So because of that, I definitely understand, and because it can potentially impair on other people's inalienable rights. This is a very libertarian way of arguing for this. It does make a lot of sense to have some measure of regulations. I definitely don't believe in a free reign, but I also don't believe in this restrictive prohibition. Considering that on a national scale, we tried it with alcohol in the 1920s, actually starting with 1919 and then going through the 20s, and we all know how well that worked out. We ended up repealing that amendment by another constitutional amendment, and I don't think that is going to. It's the same. It's pretty much the same situation, and we've had this prohibition for longer, and I don't think it's really helped any. And I'm not saying that it. I don't know. I have to think about this a little bit more. But the point is that certainly the way that we're doing things now, the restrictive prohibitions and everything has to be done on the federal level, and it's not really working. My take on it is that marijuana should be. I would favor more that marijuana should be legal, but regulated, much in the same way that alcohol does. You have certain age requirements that you have to meet. As far as buying them, there would be licenses and various hoops that you have to go to get, much like with selling alcohol, and also put a tax on it, and that way in a way it lowers the price of marijuana. You don't have the you're not spending a lot of money trying to enforce it, and if anything, you get a new revenue stream that could help you with some other things, but hopefully it will get you to pay off some debts, take care of some other business, not give you the incentive, oh, we got some new money, now we can put these new projects in, and that's may not be beneficial for everybody. Yeah, this is the classical liberal libertarian in me talking, so I don't apologize for that. But anyway, so that now we also got that out of the way. This is going to be a little sidetracks, and I apologize for this. But I think this is a film that by now I think most people are familiar with, and if you're not, I would say I would definitely say go check it out. It's a really good, and now I'm getting into more into the what I get out of it, what I got out of it this more recent time. For starters, it's and if you don't know what this is, you can probably figure out what this talks about. Very briefly, the film is actually 3 interconnected stories. There's a story that takes place in Mexico, involving a cop that is in the middle of the drug war, more on the supply side. There's another story that goes back and forth pretty much. Actually, it goes a few other places, but mostly it's Cincinnati, where he lives, and Washington, D.C., where he works. He's the new drug czar, the new director of the National Office of Drug Policy and Control. And it's about him matriculating into this job, and he's a very staunch anti-drug guy, or someone who believes that what we're doing is working, that we need to control the supply, and we need to heavier regulations and that sort of thing. Although he also adds into more education and rehabilitation. He feels that should be pushed more, not just empowering more law enforcement and trying to control the supply side. So that's another story. And then there's another story that takes place in San Diego, involving a distributor who gets arrested by the DEA, and he's brought to trial. So there's a lot. This is one of those films where there's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of plot, and I think there's 145 speaking parts in the whole film, and it was a mammoth task. It was shot in 54 days. Soderbergh was his own cinematographer in that, and it was just a massive amount of material. It's in a way it is kind of an epic film, and you could perhaps call it an independent, a epic indie film, or an indie epic film, because this was produced by USA Films. It was and there was not really a guarantee that this was going to be a big popular film, but then when it came out, it was talked about, and again, it garnered 5 Academy Award nominations. I think it should have. I think the nominations that went to both Traffic and Aaron Brockovich, I think it should have gone to Traffic more, because because again, like I just said, you have 3 intertwining stories. You have all these different pieces that you really need to make sure that every one of them worked, and that's what I think Soderbergh was the only one that could really pull it off, and pull it off really well. Because I mean, talk about the potential of it being just a big mess of a film, a big clusterfuck, but yet it doesn't. There really isn't so much of a bum note. You could argue that maybe the pacing is maybe a bit uneven in certain spots, but really I think the whole thing just really works. And considering that you do have 3 intertwining stories with a lot of parts and a lot of little things that really need to work together in order for the whole thing to make sense, it's really, I mean, it was really impressive in that respect, and you got to admire that. So, anyways, one of the things I get from this go around was that it's one of the few, I guess you would call it, political films, or certainly a film that centers on a hot political issue. It was certainly hot in 2000, and it's still relevant in 2013. It's one of the few political films that really works for all positions, and it's because it doesn't try to pick a side. I find that the films that do work politically, that do deal with a political issue, are the ones that obviously they don't really take a position, and and the positions are represented more or less honestly, or as honestly as you can make it. I mean, nobody's ever without bias. The belief that you can say something purely objectively is, I think it's a delusion we harbor in ourselves. There's always going to be some tint. There's always going to be some lean one way or the other. But the way that you minimize it, I think, the way you minimize the bias, not eliminate it, but minimize it, is if you present all positions and you try to do it in a very honest and very human way. I mean, you could watch this film and you think that all drugs are bad, that they should still be illegal, there should still be there should be the same enforcement of the laws. In fact, maybe it should be more stringent, more stricter enforcement of the laws. Or you could be somebody that says that drugs aren't that bad, this prohibition is stupid, and it should be completely illegal, and there should be no regulations whatsoever. And then there's people in the middle. I mean, that's what the issue. That's the spectrum that the issue generates, and the reason why the film works is because it First off, it understands that there is a spectrum, and you can't have. And you can't favor one side or the other. The other is that it's still not really. It's still not completely resolved, and if you. And if you do take the position of sticking to one side of the spectrum or the next, there's the presumption that you also know what the solution is going to be. And because we haven't really quite figured out what the solution is, and certainly we haven't come to an agreement of what the solution could be, it's still very open-ended. So it's a film that respects the complexity of the issue. And again, that's what makes it so amazing, the fact that you were able to pull this off in a little over 2 hours. with that many storylines, with that many characters. It's quite a feat. I mean, could there have been some things that have been done better? Of course, you can always do things a little bit better. But considering that, but it's pretty much. I think it's probably as good as you're ever going to get in that issue. But at any rate, so it's definitely, and I think the reason why the other reason why I feel that it goes this route is because Soderbergh is also somebody who understands film history and the history of cinema, and he's another one of those directors that can cite films before him and says, "Oh, I got this. Or I've seen this scene in this film, and I like this film," and so forth. I know his favorite is All the President's Men, for instance, and there's traces of that. But there are two films that he cites in particular that, as far as influencing traffic, and they will be covered by me later on down the road. One is the Battle of Algiers, and the other is Z. And I think it's because of Z, and more broadly with Costa Gravis. And I'll definitely talk about when I get to talking about Missing and Z, that the reason why I feel that he can get away with being a political filmmaker is that for him it's not purely about the politics. It's first off, he makes entertaining films, and also he understands that it has to appeal to a lot of people. It can't just be sticking to one position and you end up preaching to the choir. You really have to kind of bring in everybody, including the people that you may not like or you may not feel any kind of sympathy for. So I think that's by inviting everybody, by giving everybody a fair chance, a fair voice, and also letting the audience figure it out. I think maybe Traffic probably had some influence in the way that I think about the whole drug issue. But it's because it gives the space. It doesn't tell you what to think. It just sort of lays it all out, and then you come to the conclusions. You figure out, okay, I like this, I don't like this, or whatever it is, whatever you conclude. And it's up to, it invites you to figure out. It draws you in and doesn't insult your intelligence. Like I think other films that are politically charged and they do tackle political issues. And that's also how you, and assuming that there was, I don't think there was an agenda for this, but assuming that there was an agenda for this film, that's a better way to win you over, win you over to that agenda, is by just presenting it and just letting you figure it out instead of telling you this is exactly what you need to do. If you come off as forceful and polemic and didactic, it tends to be a turnoff from a lot of people. The only people who are going to really get into it are the people who agree with you anyway. This is why Michael Moore is very limited. Yes, he makes a lot of money, but it's because he's espousing positions and opinions that are quite popular, certainly at the moment, and that is that's what drives it. But it doesn't really win over anything. And I would even say the same thing for the other side. I'm a little bit slight political confession. Yes, I call myself a classical liberal. You can also think of it as libertarian, but I don't. I get kind of confused about what that label really means and what that entails. But so I'm definitely not a fan of modern liberalism. And I'm closer to Ayn Rand in some respects. Actually, I prefer Hobbes, Locke, and Smith more than I do Rand, or Rand. Sorry, I always keep screwing up the pronunciation, but the Ayn Rand. I'm a bit closer to her in terms of how I think this. I suspect a lot of negative comments are at this point, but just grow up. Really, you shouldn't be surprised that you'll meet somebody that you disagree with in some way. But anyways, I try not to make it personal. So, anyways, but even then, like, I know that Atlas Shrugged is being made, and while they're fairly decent in their own right, I don't feel that they it's really more to the choir. It's not. I think the real challenge is to have a film that does have that position, but also draws you on the other side. So anyway, so the point is that when the danger of taking a particular position is that you do limit your audience. Whereas if you just present it and present it as broadly as possible, you can invite a bit more. Another thing that I picked up in this go around is that I think that this is one of the few, because the film itself is based on a UK TV miniseries, also called Traffic, but spelled differently, spelled with a K at the end. And it, so this is an example of a American remake of a European film, and this has happened quite a number of times. In fact, there's been a few cases where it involves the same director. The Vanishing is an example of this. Funny Games is another example of this, and LOL is another example. And now, most of the time that when American remakes of foreign films, and especially of European films, there's a lot of things that are lost because, and there's different complaints for it, that sometimes the stories are dumbed down, sometimes the characters are dumbed down, the nuances of it are gone. Sometimes a situation that works really well in Europe doesn't really translate well to America. I mean, a really good example of this is very recent, and that is House of Cards. I remember, and I do have the original, BBC, made in 1991, I think was the year. But I remember that very well, and the thing that everybody who is seeing the original House of Cards is they remember the character of Francis Urquhart, played by Ian Richardson. And it's a very Machiavellian, very Richard III. Yes, I know they recently found him. World record for longest hide and seek. But there was just something. But it was that performance. It was that character. It was his working the system that made it very memorable. Now there is a American remake done in miniseries, and it's done through Netflix. David Fincher is involved with it. Kevin Spacey is playing the Francis Urquhart type character. Now, I have not seen the episodes of it. I have seen the trailer, and the trailer, based on that, I had kind of a bad feeling about it. Now, I really like David Fincher, and I really liked what he did with the girl with the dragon tattoo. I haven't seen the Swedish take on it. I'm saving that until after he's done with all of it, just to kind of I don't know. That's how I'm going to do it. But looking at the trailer, I felt that I had a bad feeling about it, and I think it's because House of Cards really it's very British. And British politics are very different than American politics in a lot of ways. And in fact, in high school I took comparative government, so that's why I can talk about this with some degree. I know pretty much what I'm talking about in this case. But actually, you don't even have to take comparative government. Basically, you just watch. If you watch C-SPAN, and you look at what seeing the House of Representatives in session, the U.S. House of Representatives in session, or the U.S. Senate in session, and then compare that to whenever they show Question Time over in the House of Commons, and there's a big difference. It is a big difference. America feels more stilted. It feels slightly more pompous, but Question Time, it just feels it's like a couple steps away from turning into a full-on pub brawl, where if there was alcohol in there, if everybody was drinking pints of Boddingtons and whatnot, it's gonna devolve into fistfights. You know, it's what you think maybe perhaps what's going on in the Scottish Parliament as well. Just full on fistfights and everything. And but it's just like a couple steps away from going into that territory. It's a lot more engaging. I mean that's an example of the difference between the two, and I think that it's the challenge in doing that kind of adaptation when you go from certainly from one country to another, in this case, from one country to the next, is how do you translate the situations and maybe keep some of the elements of the story, but still also feel true to the new location. And Traffic is now the point of all this is that Traffic does this really well, and first and foremost, it's because it is set in America, and the way that America has, I mean, the way that Europe has their drug situation, it makes sense. In the UK TV miniseries, it focuses on Pakistan, Berlin, maybe not Berlin, but I know it's Germany. I haven't seen it, so this is going by hearsay. Pakistan, Germany, and sometimes London. And that sort of connection makes sense because that's how the drug situation would be in Europe and in the UK. For America, it's all about Mexico. It's all about Latin America. So that right away tells you it's a bit more that it's true to the geography and true to the situation. So that's where I feel like the changes were appropriate, obviously, because you're in a particular country, and it was executed well so that it feels more genuine and true, and American audiences will get it. And I would imagine that if you know something about the UK TV series, this is one of those compatible adaptations where you feel like where in the end you say that this is apples and oranges. How can I choose one over the other? Because they both handle the situation really well in their respective geographies. I don't think I can say that with House of Cards. But again, I haven't seen the episodes. I could be wrong on this, but I get a feeling that I probably won't like it. And I think it will come down to is because I know the original so well, and Ian Richardson just did a fantastic job with playing Francis Urquhart, and it's like, how can you top that, really? It just works so well, and then also it works with the situation very well. British politics tend to land themselves more with Machiavellian type plots than American politics do. I think it's because we understand that we understand that approach, that you can use whatever means are necessary to achieve power or to achieve order, and we kind of know that power corrupts, so we set up a system so that we try to do the least amount of damage with power. Now, unfortunately, I think that's kind of changing for the worst, I think. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. And then finally, I think the last thing, and this is something that I haven't really gotten into as much, which is the Criterion part of these episodes. I mean, these are certainly about the films first and foremost, but a lot of why I chose the Criterion Collection as not my only means, certainly, but definitely my primary means of exploring cinema is because Criterion is really the best and certainly the most affordable film school that anyone can attend. You don't have to take on a whole lot of debt. Probably the worst debt you can probably take on is credit card debt, but don't worry, I don't go that far. If I really wanted to do that, I would be talking about a lot more titles than I do right now. Again, this was 150 titles acquired over the span of a little over 10 years. So about 15 a year, not too bad. And even several box sets too. So, but the Traffic DVD, and then subsequently it was issued on Blu-ray as well. I believe in 2000. I want to say 2011, maybe 2012. I think I forget the year. But this is an example of why Criterion is worth getting. This is one of those titles where you really get into the film itself and what went into it, and you really, really appreciate it. In fact, I wanted to talk about this one in particular because what's really fascinating are the demonstrations that were included. There are three major demonstrations that the Traffic DVD has. The first one covers the film processing, and they specifically talk about the Mexico sequences. Part of the way that you're able to keep track of these intertwining stories is due to the fact that they were shot and processed in unique ways. And this covers specifically the Mexico sequence. And basically, it was a process. It was a combination of raw footage that was shot in a particular way. It was using a tobacco filter and also shot at a 45-degree shutter speed. Sorry, the shutter angle was 45 degrees. It was a combination of that and then digital color timing. So there was a digital intermediate involved. And then that was then printed onto Ektachrome stock. And then it was just combining the two, combining the original negative, which would then be timed, and then the Ektachrome stock to give it that sort of very high contrast, very grainy, almost sepia-like tones. I mean, you just kind of feel every time I look at the Mexico sequences, I just feel like this overwhelming heat. It definitely fits, I think, most perceptions of Mexico. For the other sequences, the San Diego sequences, it was shot with it was more of a process, and it was done with flashing. And then for the Cincinnati/Washington DC sequences, excuse me. That was shot using tungsten film, but without the 85C filter, which you use for color correction. Because if you don't, without that filter, everything in the daylight, it's going to come out blue. At night, this tungsten film is what you use it for night scenes and for low light situations, and it comes out fine in that situation. But if you shoot in normal daylight, it all comes out blue. It's all because of the color temperature. It's 3200K color temperature for tungsten film, and without that filter, it then screws up your color. But this one was very, very intentional, and he was able to do that because he was the DP. So the film processing shows you the steps that were taken to make the Mexico sequences. The second demonstration is the editing, and I actually watched it. I watched it very, very recently. And I really liked that one. And I liked it even more because I had actually gone through the editing process. Last year I'd made a short film called The Key in the Frame. And I actually edited the film. And so I was very familiar, so I'm very familiar with that process. And it was very fascinating to watch the editing demonstrations and knowing the process myself and what it entailed. And so it was one of those things where you see it and then everything about it just makes sense. Where he's talking about the layers, he's talking about starting with the basic shape of a scene and then adding some stuff to give it more of a feel, to give the right feel to a scene. And it was just this evolving process where you just bring out the essence of what that scene is supposed to be about. And then the third demonstration is the dialogue editing. And that was another thing I found really fascinating because I was involved with the dialogue editing as well. And him talking about some of the problems that you can encounter with working with production tracks, and also pointing out that you can use ADR in a good way, because Soderbergh is not one to like ADR. But there were only a few cases where they actually had to go use ADR. But the way it was recorded, the way they were able to blend it with the production tracks, and some of the other ambient sounds that they have, it makes it feels very seamless and very organic and natural. I'm not the biggest fan of ADR myself. In fact, I've gotten to a point where I'm starting to notice it myself when a line is ADR, when it's done badly. But obviously there are cases where ADR is used and it's used very well. So that right there, I mean, right there, it's a film school. I mean, you learn a little bit about processing, you learn a little bit about editing, and it's great. And if you have no idea what it entails, it gives you that little window into that, and it's great. And this is what makes Criterion such a great company for as far as a basis of exploring film. Not all films do this. Not all their titles do this, but the titles that do are definitely worth checking out for the supplements. And but I think even without the supplements, and there have been cases where in some of the titles, the supplements are a bit light, but in the end, you feel like it's worth it for the film alone. So, in a strange way, I almost want to prefer a bare bones Criterion over than I could prefer those more than a feature laden commercial fare that just is probably going to be crap anyway, and not worth divesting more time than is necessary, because the film itself provides a lot more. So yeah, but yeah, Traffic. It's not just an entertaining film. It's a film done very, very well, and it deals with a political issue, I feel, in a very respectful, not pandering, not polemic, insulting way. In fact, probably one of my favorite lines in that is towards the end. So perhaps mild spoilers, but very, very small and mild. I think this is a film that most people know anyway, so I think I'm fairly safe in talking about this. But there's a line towards the end where Robert, played by Michael Douglas, and he's supposed to be he was the new drug czar, but then at the end he decides not to do it because his daughter got mixed up with drugs, and it's revealed that she is very much an addict, and that's going to be her struggle, and so she's going through the equivalents of Alcoholics Anonymous, some kind of 12-step program, maybe not necessarily evoking, maybe not using 12 steps, but certainly some kind of rehabilitation program. And he's there, and towards the end, he says he's in this rehabilitation meeting, and he says, "My name is Robert, and I'm here with my wife Barbara, and we're here to support our daughter Caroline, and we're here to listen." And I really like that line. I really, really like that. We are here to listen. And I like it because, again, it's instead of just sometimes you may just come in with a clear idea and you just need to say it. But at the same time, with speaking comes listening, and it really does need to be a two-way affair. And at the very least, there should be some civility and respect, and also a mutual understanding that this is not about one side being right, the other side being wrong, or that my truth or my being right comes at the expense of you being wrong. It's not a zero-sum thing. It's really just it should be about, we're all in this together, and we want to build each other up. We don't want to drag each other down into the muck and mire and such. So, but yeah, if you haven't seen Traffic, go see it. And I hope that covers a lot. And obviously, this is a film that I could probably talk a lot, because there's a lot of details and a lot of things that went into it, and it's really, really fascinating in that regard. But really, if you haven't seen it, go see it. And especially if you want to see a good political film, and if you want to see a good film that handles a heated political topic well. So, yeah, and that's Traffic. And until next time, take care.